Greetings, everyone. Thank you for stopping by our channel. Here on the channel, we primarily cover three topics: real estate, stocks, and college football. Today, we're going to talk college football as we preview the Pac-12 conference for 2023. Who do we have winning the conference? This is a great conference top to bottom. There's some really good football teams. Join us as we lay out who we see finishing where in the Pac-12. Now, before we get started, we got to note that this is the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it. UCLA and USC are moving to the Big Ten next year. And just a couple of weeks ago, we find out that Deion Sanders has got Colorado going over to the Big 12, where they left years ago to go to the Pac-12. There are some other rumors out there that Washington and Oregon could also be going to the to the Big Ten. And some other teams could be making a move as well. We'll keep our eye on that. But for right now, we're previewing the Pac-12 as it is in 2023. And let's get to it. Okay, folks, so bringing up the rear in the Pac-12 this year, we have the Stanford Cardinal. Now, we have always thought, and we still think, that David Shaw is an excellent football coach. But after a dynamite decade-long run, it's hardly debatable the situation became stale there at the farm. While Stanford went 4-2 in the COVID year, otherwise they haven't had a winning season since going 9-4 in 2019. So we enter Troy Taylor, himself of stellar reputation in the coaching circles, to inject a youthful enthusiasm inside the Cardinal program. Now, limited starters return on both sides of the ball, so Taylor is starting from the 1-yard line. Offensively, we're not sure who has caught Taylor's eye at quarterback, but it looks to Ari Patu to start. Watch freshman Miles Jackson. He could figure in there. Now, E.J. Smith is back from injury at running back, and one bright spot is tight end Benjamin Uresic, who was second-team All-Pac-12 in 2022. Now, 6 of the top 7 tacklers are gone, but David Bailey, the linebacker, he was 4th in 22 stops. He's back. There is some experience on the defensive line. Now, folks, this is a project, so patience is key. The Cardinals' schedule, as you know, is not easy, particularly for a team embarking on a significant transition. Beating Sacramento State and picking off a conference game somewhere would be a decent opening season for Troy Taylor and the Cardinal. Next up, we have Colorado. Now, in a bold move, Colorado goes prime time and brings in Deion Sanders as head coach. Now, Sanders comes in after a highly successful tenure at Jackson State, and we all know his performance throughout his career, both in the National Football League and Major League Baseball. Now, one of the most phenomenal athletes of modern history. We are fans of Deion, but he does things his own way, which is not for everybody, and the Colorado football team now knows, as very few players from last year's dismal squad remain. Almost the entire program is new, so few, if anyone, can really get a handle on what to expect with Colorado, particularly early on. Offensively, Deion's son, Shedeur Sanders, joins his father in Boulder. Now, the junior Sanders has been a prolific player at Jackson State, and we think he's going to continue to flourish with the Buffaloes. Dual player Travis Hunter, a 5-star recruit Sanders secured at Jackson State, has also come to Boulder. These two, joined by running back Alton McCaskill, who transfers in from Houston, could flash in the offense. A bunch of transfers are going to man the positions along the offensive line. Defensively, the aforementioned Travis Hunter will play corner, and he will be dynamite. Cormani McClain, a top recruit from Miami, should start immediately. Up front, a pair of transfers, Derek McClendon from Florida State and Jordan Dominic from Arkansas, join Clemson linebacker Levante Bentley to give the Buffs a great foundation to work with. Now, this is going to take some time, but it will be fresh fun for prime time right out of the gate. Colorado opens at TCU, and that's going to be interesting. Now, Sanders does not know the history, but hated rival Nebraska's in Boulder for the home opener. These are 2 golden opportunities for Sanders and the Buffaloes. Back-to-back games at Oregon and home to USC come before the midseason point. The season closes at Wazoo and Utah. coming after a road trip to Pasadena and home contest with Oregon State and Arizona. Now, Sanders does not appreciate losing, and he has no plans to do so, which adds so much appeal to the Buffaloes. Sanders is a master at promotion. He plans to answer all that attention with nothing but success. We think he will, but it will take some time. A bowl game for the Buffaloes in 2023 would be one heck of an achievement, and we'll be watching. Coming in 10th in the Pac-12, we have Arizona State. Now, the Sun Devils ended the failed experiment with Herm Edwards, and they've got some NCAA violations to show for it. Now, the Devils hired a well-thought-of, up-and-coming offensive coordinator as head coach who also happens to be an alumni, and they'd like him to resurrect this proud program that has failed to capture the local enthusiasm that you would think it deserves. Now, I have always thought of Arizona State as a sleeping giant, and Kenny Dillingham may just be the young leader to help ASU reach their lofty goals. Now, Dillingham has spent time at Auburn, Florida State, and Oregon, so he is experienced across the fruited plain. Dillingham is somewhat of a quarterback guru, and he will welcome in Notre Dame sophomore transfer Drew Pine, who started 11 games for the Irish last year. This acquisition should have compounding returns. The running back room is bare in terms of experience, but thankfully the line is a veteran group, with two coming in with over a dozen starts elsewhere. Now, 3 top pass catchers from 2022 return, including Elijah Badger, who had hauled in 70 aerials. Although limited starters return in the front 7, defensive tackle Anthony Cooper is quite solid. The secondary is the strength of the defense, with Roe Terrence and Jordan Clark leading the way. Now, last year was a mess, but somehow the Sun Devils beat Washington, which they also did in 2021. That's very puzzling. Now, they got 4 home contests to kick off the season and allow an opportunity for some momentum to build. Among those coming in are Oklahoma State Week 2 and USC to open conference play in Week 4. Now, 3-1 here would be optimal, although that's not likely. After a midseason bye, road tilts at highly ranked Washington, no doubt ready for revenge against these Sun Devils. Utah and UCLA come to mind. Oregon, Washington State, and Arizona are at home. Now, a winning season would be very well received, but the reality is that Dillingham should follow the playbook of his former boss Mike Norvell and enact a 3-year plan to bring Arizona State to the head of the Pac-12. We think he's got the capabilities of doing just that. In 9th, we have Cal Berkeley. Now, 17 starters return from a California team that went 4-8 in 2022 under highly regarded coach Justin Wilcox, generally known for his defensive prowess. For the Bears to take the next step, progress will need to be made on the offensive side of the ball. The Bears need a new signal caller, and they welcome in TCU transfer Sam Jackson, who could well provide that spark. Jaden Ott, the team's leading 22 rusher, and Jeremiah Hunter, who led the team in 22 in receptions and yards, both return and are among the best in the conference at their respective positions. Center Matthew Cindric and a great guard in Vaitkani are among 4 returning offensive line starters. Linebacker Jackson Simon, the top tackler in 2022, he returns to lead the team on the stop side. The honors candidate had 104 tackles a year ago. The secondary is experienced and strong, which matches well in the After Dark Conference in the Pac-12. Noel Williams, Craig Woodson, and transfer Patrick McMorris get together to form this stellar group. On Week 2, Auburn comes to Berkeley, and while we respect Auburn, and most importantly the SEC, this could be a real trap for the Tigers if the Bears are ready to roll. This is a pivotal game for both teams. Now, Cal will visit Washington in Week 4, and they face a very strong Oregon State team and visit Utah before the midseason bye. Now, USC and Washington State are at home, but Oregon, the big game, and UCLA are out on the road. Cal could well reach a bowl game, but it seems the schedule, no matter what the offensive improvement looks like, highly limits the upside for the Bears. Next up, we have Arizona. Now, you got a sense quickly that Jed Fish was off to a good start with the Wildcats. And while playing closer games as 2021 closed, the Cats leaped to 5-7 last year, which included playing more good teams close, even upsetting UCLA. Now the Cats, can they continue their ascent? Well, improvement will need to start on the defensive side of the ball, where the Cats gave up a horrific average of 36 points per game. But only 3 starters are back, so they will be inexperienced as well on the stop side. Arizona went heavy in the portal, though. They did get Oregon linebacker Justin Lowe, who will lead the defense from the middle linebacker spot. Traden Stukes, a star Roval nickelback, one of those types of players, he will quarterback the back end of the defense. Several transfers from across the nation, Georgia, Indiana, Cal, they're going to be fighting for spots that are available up front. Offensively, Jaden DeLora is an outstanding quarterback, and he makes plenty of plays. Last year, he had 25 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Top rusher Michael Riley is back at running back, and Jason Cowling and Tanner McMillan form a very productive group of receivers. 3 linemen are back. They're led by Jordan Morgan. The schedule is rough, and it includes a trip to Mississippi State Week 2. Washington, UCLA, and Oregon are the home games. And while USC is on the road, there is no Oregon. Now, Arizona's going to score points, but it would be a surprise if the Cats can get enough defense to get enough wins for a bowl game in 2023. At 7th, we have Washington State. Now, we found quite distasteful the dismissal of the prior coach by the Washington State brass and thought the culture would suffer. But while there may have been some internal issues, maybe not, new head coach Jake Dickert has risen to the challenge. The Cougars really impressed us a year ago. It was not only that they knocked off Wisconsin and Madison, but the way they were playing and carrying themselves on the field. The Cougars continued to be intense all season, and they lost some close games to conference heavyweights like Utah and Oregon, and reached a bowl game for the 2nd consecutive season. Now, they do have a new offensive coordinator, but it's Ben Arbuckle, who comes in from highly powered offensive machine Western Kentucky. Offensively, Washington State's going to rely on Cameron Ward, who transferred in last year from Incarnate Word, who impressed with a decent 23-9 touchdown to interception ratio. Now, the line is very experienced, and top rusher Nakia Watson returns. The loss of production at the receiver position is concerning, and a few transfers have appropriately been added to give some help. Now, the defensive unit returns 5 starters, but thankfully there's quality experience at every level of the defense. Defensive end Brennan Jackson is in the lineup. He's great pressuring quarterbacks, and fellow defensive end Ron Stone excels at that as well. Ahmed McCullough is an active linebacker, but look for Jaden Hicks, who's second in the stops last fall on the tackles on the team. He's back, and he's the star of the defense back in the secondary there. Cha Smith-Wade had 8 pass breakups last year, so consider this Cougar secondary stout. Now, this fall, an upset group of Badgers are going to come to Pullman, but there lies a great opportunity, so look out. Now, the conference schedule is challenging, with UCLA, Oregon, and Washington all on the road, and Oregon State at home. If these Cats keep doing what they're doing, and we see it happening, the Cougars could be bowling again, maybe 7-5. At 6, we have UCLA. The initial phase of eyes watching Chip Kelly at Westwood has moved on to more pressing items, but UCLA returns a veteran team in 2023 that could surprise for those not in the know. One area of youth is at quarterback, where the Bruins seem prepared to go with 5-star true freshman Dante Moore. If they don't, they will soon enough. Moore's got exceptional tools, not all that dissimilar to those of the departed DTR. Now, Ball State transfer running back Carson Steele is set to soar with the Bruins, but TJ Harden and Keegan Jones had 100 carries between them last year. They're both back as well. Now, UCLA's got some transfer receivers. They got Kyle Ford from USC and Michael Sturdivant from Cal. They've arrived to bolster the attack. Spencer Holstage, he anchors the offensive line, which is a veteran unit. Now, 9 defensive starters helped the Bruins solidify a defensive unit that gave up way too many points per game last year. Now, UCLA's got talent up front. 2 great ends, Gabriel Murphy and Laitu Leitu. They join nose tackle Jay Toyoa. Now, this is a great group up front. Top 22 tackler Darius Massall is back at linebacker. The secondary returns a ton of experience. They're led by free safety Kenny Churchwell, and they add Bowling Green safety Jordan Anderson. Now, UCLA should well be 4-0 heading to Utah. But their road schedule is not brutal. Only at USC and Oregon State will UCLA potentially be an underdog. There's no Oregon or Washington, and UCLA will be favored in the rest of them. So we got the Bruins 8-4, and we consider them a team. If they get great quarterback play from this freshman Moore, they could surprise. Keep an eye on the Bruins. Next we have Oregon. Now you had to be impressed with Dan Lanning in Oregon last year. After getting embarrassingly dismantled by Georgia 49-3 in the opener, Oregon rebounded to finish 10-3 with a Holiday Bowl victory over North Carolina. In fact, they blew a big lead against Oregon State, or they may have been in the Pac-12 playoff. But part of how that happened was the outstanding play of quarterback Bo Nix. He flourished under the direction of offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham. But Dillingham is off to coach Arizona State, so there's a new offensive coordinator. But Nix is ready for another big year as part of a team that has 8 offensive starters back. Bucky Irving, an conference all-honors candidate who ran for over 1,000 yards, he's back at running back. 3 of the top 4 pass catchers are returning, led by wide receiver Tony Franklin and tight end Terrence Ferguson. Trayshawn Holden transfers in from Alabama as well. 3 of the 5 starters on the offensive line are back, which is set to include Nishad Strother, who comes in from East Carolina. Consider the Ducks potent on offense. Oregon returns 8 defensive starters, but only 3 of them were among the top 5 tacklers for 2022. Now, edge Brandon Dorcas leads the Ducks up front. He's an All-America candidate. Weak side linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, who is the team's second leading tackler in 22, he's going to man the second level. Alabama transfer Kyrie Jackson's going to jump in at cornerback, and Evan Williams at safety. They lead the secondary. There are pieces, and Nix is a great player, but there's also some holes, and we wonder about the loss of Dillingham, who Nix had a long relationship with. The Ducks had better have their defensive head straps on tight on an early road trip to Texas Tech in week 2. Now, Oregon cannot be worse than 4-1 by the bye week. It's a rough slate to close, however. Road trips to Washington and Utah and home games with Washington State, USC, and Oregon State close the schedule. We like the Ducks tying for that position in there, 8-4 overall. At 4, we have Oregon State. Now, Oregon State, they've always seemingly been swimming uphill, but they're a much better football team and program than most know. And the Beavers continue to do work and continue to improve. We were considering them as a surefire top 15 team heading into the season, but they lost their top tackler and NFL prospect linebacker Omar Spates in the portal to LSU. Now, Oregon State returns their starting quarterback. He's a good one. But they went into the portal and got Clemson transfer DJ Uiagalelei, who started 28 games with the Tigers. He would seem to fit the Beaver system well. The top 4 rushers, led by All-America candidate Damian Martinez, who ran for over 1,000 yards last year, they return. Anthony Gould leaves the receiving corps. The line offensively very experienced, led by honors candidates Joshua Gray and Talise Fuaga. Even without Spates, the defense, they're a scrappy bunch. They'll be solid. In the back end, the top returning tackler from 2022 is free safety Ketan Oladapo. He's an all-conference honors candidate. He's going to team with nickelback Ryan Cooper, and they're going to form a very strong secondary nucleus. Now, up front, James Rawls, he's nose tackle in there, 8.5 tackles for loss last year. He's going to plug in the middle. Easton Mascarenas Arnold could really excel at linebacker. Keep your eye on him. He's going to team with Illinois transfer C.J. Hart, who comes in. Now, it would seem a 4-2 start at minimum is reasonable for the first half of the year, with Oregon State perhaps favored in all except the road game at Utah and a home game with UCLA. Oregon State closes at home against Washington and at Oregon, which is going to be a tough one. But if Oregon State can continue their ascent, we think an 8-4 season and tied in there with several of these other teams in the Pac-12, that's what we're going to be looking at. But watch Oregon State. They could really be trouble. Third, we have Utah. Now, last year we projected Utah to reach the college football playoff, but Utah fumbled their way to a loss in the heat at the Swamp in Gainesville, Florida. But they did recover to win the Pac 12 title game, defeating Southern Cal for a second time last season. Now, while the 2022 team seemed a veteran bunch, so is this squad with 16 starters back. Part of the optimism for 2023 surrounds the return of quarterback Cameron Rising. Now, he was injured in the Rose Bowl. He may not be quite ready for the season opener, and that's quite important as the Florida Gators are visiting. Now, Florida is down, but they've got talent and speed everywhere except quarterback, so be careful with those Gators. Now, Jaquindon Jackson steps in at running back along with Micah Bernard. That's a great pair. Devon Keeley returns at wideout after 55 catches a year ago, and he teams with Money Parker to form a dynamic duo. But the money is actually with tight end Brant Kuithe, who's an All-America, solid All-America candidate at tight end. The guy's a great player. Now, the offensive line that is fantastic, led by Keaton Bills and Satyaya Lumania. Getting by Florida, especially if Rising is out or limited, will not be easy. And then there's a trip to Baylor that could really be interesting. Now, hosting UCLA and visiting Oregon State to close a first half slate is tough. There are also very tough road games at USC and Washington and a home game against Oregon. These are all good football teams, and they raise the degree of difficulty of this schedule, which we think prohibits Utah from winning the Pac-12 this year. We think we got them at about 9-3. Second, we have Southern Cal. Now, brilliant Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams returns under Lincoln Riley, and pieces are in place for USC to once again be among the potent teams in the nation offensively. Williams had an incredible 42-5 touchdown to interception ratio. There's no reason to think this type of performance will not continue. Austin Jones, second on the team in rushing last year, he's back. But watch incoming transfer Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina. Hey, a lot of folks want to be part of the Southern Cal uprising. Taj Washington, Brendan Rice, and Mario Williams form a stellar wide receiver room. Do keep an eye out on standout receiver Dorian Stringer, who comes in from Arizona, where he had over 1,000 receiving yards last year. Now, the offensive line is better. They're pretty good. And they have at least a pair of conference honors candidates. So look for 40 points a game. That's possible with this group. Now, it's on the defensive side where USC is in need of improvement, and everyone understands that. Although 9 starters return, the Trojans didn't stop much of anybody in 2022. Evidence of Tulane. A bright spot to build on is safety Caleb Bullock, who's an All-America candidate. Now, Oklahoma State transfer Mason Cobb should be all Pac-12 at linebacker at a minimum, and they're looking for Georgia transfer Keithan Alexander to dive in at nose tackle and make a difference. Now, beyond that, the top 3 tacklers, free safety Max Williams, linebacker Shane Lee, and linebacker Eric Gentry all return. So USC does seem to be poised to be much improved on the stop side. Now, Southern Cal will be favored by 2 scores plus all the way out to a 6-0 start before they have to go to Notre Dame. Now, a home game with Utah follows, and USC has to close with a rough trifecta. Washington at home, at Oregon, and then home for the Bruins. 11-1 and a spot in the Pac-12 championship game looks like it's in the cards for the for the Trojans, and maybe more. Winning the Pac-12 this year, we have the Washington Huskies. Now, the Huskies got really good in a hurry under Kalen DeBoer, and this team, which returns 15 starters, is stacked, and we consider the favorite to win the conference title. It all starts with quarterback Michael Penix Jr., who was sensational in 2022, throwing 31 touchdowns against 8 interceptions, but for 4,641 yards. Now, Penix is locked and loaded for 2023. Cameron Davis, he had 107 carries last year. He assumes the duties at running back. But there are 2 transfers. Dylan Johnson from Mississippi State, keep your eye on him. And Daniel Nagata from Arizona State, they joined the team. Now, 2 1,000-yard receivers are back for Penix. This is Rome Adunzi, 1145 yards, and James McMillan 1,098 yards. They form perhaps the nation's top duo at that position. As if that's not enough, Jalen Polk, Giles Jackson, and Jack Westover, who would be high-level starters most anywhere else, they're going to figure in. Now, Troy Fatiano leads the offensive line. That's a usual strength for the Huskies. Now, 8 starters are back on defense, and all conference performers are housed at each level. Defensive end Braylon Trice is an All-America candidate to be sure. Alfonso Tupatala is he was second on the team in stops in 2022. He's back. He's all-conference at linebacker. Star corner Jabbar Muhammad's transfer in from Oklahoma State, combining with strong safety Asa Turner. This secondary is going to be outstanding. Now, the Huskies are loaded most everywhere, but can they sustain it week in and week out? That's what we want to see. Now, they got to go to Michigan State in the non-con, and then they travel to Arizona before they have a bye week. We'd be stunned to find Washington anything other than 5-0 at this point. Then Oregon comes to town, and they're both off of a bye, and that's going to be a critical matchup. From there, Utah and Washington State, who we know they're dangerous, they're at home. And then USC and Oregon State, those are tough ones. They're on the road. Now, the Huskies seem to go in at about 10-2 at the worst-case scenario, but we think they'll be 11-1. We think they'll be in the Pac-12 championship game, and they're going to fight it out for perhaps a spot in the college football playoff. So there you have it, folks. We have Washington and Southern California as our favorites in the conference, and Oregon State, Utah, and UCLA right nipping at the heels there. This is going to be an exciting conference, and really a lot of great teams in this conference. And we're also interested to see what's going to go on over at Colorado. So this is going to be a fun year for the Pac-12, the last of the Pac-12 as we know it. So do drop us some comments. Let us know what you think about our predicted finish here. Love to hear your thoughts on what you think is going to happen in the Pac-12. Keep an eye out for some other predictions for some other conferences, and then we'll get into our top 25 as we get right up on the season. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.